Jean-Jacques Rousseau, one of the major political influences of the Enlightenment, as well as having a great impact on modern social, political, and economic discourse, mostly due to him being one of the first political thinkers in human history to ever tackle the idea of inequality. So let's talk about it. But before we jump right into that, very quickly, basically none of the people who watch my videos are subscribed, so if you do like this, maybe give a like and maybe subscribe as well, just to keep me doing them, and, support the channel. It'd be very nice. Anyway, let's get right into this. Born the 28th of June 1712 in Geneva, Rousseau's work is very unique amongst his counterparts in the 1700s. In his two seminal pieces, The Discourse on Inequality and The Social Contract, they focus on subjects which most at the time would consider ridiculous or potentially even treasonous and are blasphemous. Rousseau argued that inequalities that we see in life are not inevitable outcomes of human nature, but are in fact socialized outcomes which can be prevented. This was particularly controversial at the time as monarchy was dominant in Europe, where a god divined a ruler with power, and everyone in society was in this place because it was chosen by God. So therefore challenging the idea of innate or inherent or, justified inequalities could be considered a challenge against not just the monarchy, but also against the religious interpretations at the time. So what actually is Rousseau's thesis? To summarize briefly, Rousseau argues that inequalities are bad because they lead to bad consequences, pretty simple, and that contrary to the common beliefs at the time, inequalities do not persist because of facts of human nature. These inequalities are down to contingent facts of human psychology, meaning that they can potentially be avoided or changed or influenced. Inequality, of course, referring specifically to what the modern definition would be things, differences in money, positional power, status, all of these sort of things, rather than, the more commonly referred to definition at the time being more things like physical inequalities, like height, strength, speed, etc., things that you can be born differently about. In order to argue this, Rousseau goes back to an argument from human nature, choosing to analyze what humans would potentially be like in the so-called state of nature, which if you study political philosophy is a term you've heard about a million times. The real definition will be up here somewhere, but it basically just means a life of no social, political, or economic institutions in any form. Rousseau describes the state of nature as a peaceful, solitary, and subsistence lifestyle where humans are purely motivated by their own survival and a quote natural repugnance for the suffering of others. So there is not really any need to interact with each other or to have conflict with each other, except in very specific fringe cases, which everyone can simply just live a subsistence lifestyle. There is enough resource for everyone. You just gather and eat, and it's all pretty relaxed. This motivation being called amour de soi, a positive motivation for self-care. And that coupled with a natural repugnance sight of suffering of others motivates a loosely cooperative, pretty peaceful life, if one which is quite basic and simplistic and not particularly luxurious. However, as society moves beyond this stage, a different psychological motivation arises, this being called AmmoProp. Rather than amour de soi as their basic need for self-care, AmmoProp is what's called a comparative need. So it's a need to be better off than someone else. So it isn't just a need to succeed or to be happy and things like this. It's specifically a need to be better off than other people and to be recognized as such. So a comparative need to be more respected, to be wealthier, to be more powerful, and to be recognized as these things. Rousseau would state that AmmoProp is basically the main motivator for negative consequences and inequalities in society. This motivation to be better than someone else, to not only succeed but to succeed more than others, necessitates this sort of inequality, and it can motivate people to do bad things, to not only succeed but to succeed beyond others. It necessitates this inequality. In this sense, Rousseau argues that most of our ills are of our own making. So if amour de soi is a motivation for one's own basic satisfaction of needs, AmmoProp is a motivation to be better than others and to be recognized as such. I think quite an easy example to apply this to would be, for example, Jeff Bezos, where despite having more wealth than he or any of us could really spend in 10 lifetimes, he still strives for more, and often at the expense of others in, say, the form of cheap labor, for example. Despite having so much more than anyone could personally use in an amour de soi sense, AmmoProp can push someone to still need to succeed more, even though there isn't really that much additional benefit to doing so, at least in a material sense. As we see in society, people go to great lengths to not only be better than others, but also to show everyone how much better they are actually doing. And I guess to be a bit of a boomer about it, you'd say social media is this type of thing where you get a bit of money, you buy a nice watch and you put it on Instagram. There is a motive that people are motivated by not only succeeding more than others, but making sure that everyone knows how much more they are succeeding. To be clear, whilst Rousseau argues that the state of nature and the solitary subsistence life is a good thing, he doesn't advocate for a return to it, mostly because that would be impossible, because humans now as a species have been socialized beyond this point. We've been brought up in our social and economic institutions that we simply could not go back to one without them in any extreme sense. Furthermore, some might argue that the motivation of AmmoProp, a drive to be better than others, could be a positive thing. A drive to succeed and to socialize is a good thing. For example, in the case of a family, being loved is one of the greatest joys we can experience in life, and in Rousseau's depiction of a AmmoProp-less society, there really wouldn't be these motivations to do these sort of things, and that's a negative thing. However, Rousseau would agree, but argues that AmmoProp goes further. It is not just a motivation to socialize and be loved, it is one to overcome and be better than others at any and all costs. In this sense, AmmoProp becomes inflamed, and a once positive motivation becomes one for bad outcomes. So Rousseau described that pretty much around the tribal stage of society, around that point, and then just beyond that, that's when AmmoProp goes from being a mostly positive thing, a drive to be successful can be good because it means that people around you can also be successful. It starts to become worse as society sort of develops in a certain direction. And one of the things that Rousseau ascribed worsening AmmoProp in the development of our society would be the existence or establishment of private property. Private property gives an easy medium to establish superiority and form systems which subjugate and confirm status above others. The owner class versus the workers. It can be quite difficult, as many leftists would argue, to enter the private property ownership class in this sense, allowing people to, in the business world, acquire assets which put them above others in a significant and almost permanent way. You pass down your assets to your children and family lineage, blah, blah, blah. It can be very difficult to sort of break these bonds, therefore confirming or constantly reaffirming AmmoProp's superiority above others. As we can see, Rousseau can be described as one of the, earliest leftist thinkers in this sense, making many arguments that people would make in the future without, the specific terminology and perhaps in a slightly more convoluted manner, taking us back to the state of nature and sort of drawing us all along. But you can very much easily apply these ideas of AmmoProp to modern society, especially to Rousseau's critiques of private property, which some people, Rousseau would argue, is driven by. So how does Rousseau say we can get past this AmmoProp psychology in society? How can we move beyond people's negative motivations to be, to succeed above others at all costs, and often, in the face of glaringly negative consequences for broader society? Well, unfortunately, the answer isn't that simple. Rousseau states that he isn't exactly sure what would be best. He thinks that it's pretty much irreversible to get rid of these motivations, especially in the short term. Maybe potentially in the very, very long term, people can be socialized out of these products, but no person who has been brought up in these institutions could ever move beyond it. So Rousseau's best argument, his what he thinks is probably the best idea, would be to form political institutions governed by what he describes as the general will. Democracy in this sense. And this would go far in separating the drive for comparative greatness from the ability to do so. But in this sense, the best way to succeed, say, in a political or economic institution would be to succeed by the general will. To succeed above others is to carry everyone with you. What is seen as success is making everyone succeed rather than just yourself. And it's one of the very, quite an early argument for democracy in some sense, rather, less specifically, but the idea of something being governed by a general will so that we can use negative motivations to end to positive consequences. This conclusion can easily be applied, I feel, to socialism, in which workers seize the means of production and therefore break the separation of the owner class and the worker class. Specifically, this can be applied to the idea of worker-owned co-ops, a system governed by general will, democracy, which can use AmmoProp to drive greatness for the benefit of all rather than just oneself. It's very difficult in a worker-owned co-op system to personally succeed to such a large extent without being, an owner in this way. So instead, people's drive to succeed would be a one for the whole group, the whole worker-owned co-op, and whole of society. And that is a brief dive into Rousseau's work on inequality. I'd recommend reading his books. They're both quite, the Discourse on Inequality is quite short, and I'd recommend it. It's a pretty easy read. If it is a little bit abstract at times. I hope it was interesting. A lot of people don't really consider Rousseau when we talk about left-wing ideas and left-wing thinkers, and I think whilst this stuff, as I've said, can be a bit abstract, it can be useful in sort of sticking down to core concepts and trying to apply some very early philosophy to how we want to improve society. And thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.